Now, our first guest of the evening, I've already given him a big build-up. I'll not repeat it. He's a very clever, smart young man from the United States, but coming to us from Moscow, where he works for RT. His name is Donald Korter, and I welcome him now. Donald, welcome for the first time, but not the last, I think, to the mother of all talk shows. Now, in my opening remarks, I implied, more than implied, explicitly stated that neither Russia nor Ukraine want a war. It seems that it's the United States and its vassals, particularly the United Kingdom, that are really pushing the envelope on all this. Is that how it looks to you in Moscow?
Hey there, George. Well, thanks a lot for inviting me on the show again. It's always a pleasure. Yeah, I would say it does look like that. I mean, I heard your introductory statement. I thought you hit the nail right on the head when you said that, a lot of NATO countries, leaders of NATO countries are saying they're not, ready to commit to some sort of armed conflict in Ukraine. It sounds crazy to a lot of people, and I'm sure they're no exception. And, there are European leaders who are saying that they're not going to allow their militaries to participate in such in such an engagement that is obviously, part of the foreign policy of the United States. And that much, I think, is clear and evident by the fact that NATO said there will be no dedication of NATO troops in Ukraine to fight some sort of war. It all ties into this sort of myth that the United States has forged around what's going on in East Ukraine, and that the Kiev government has also said as a willing partner in this attempt to basically put pressure on Russia, if you will, that everyone in East Ukraine and these breakaway provinces are just, Russian occupiers or something. I've been there many times. I'm filming a documentary film right there, and I didn't see any Russian occupation when I went there. We interviewed normal people as well as the administrations that are right now in charge of the country. They're locals there,
Well, if they can organize a gigantic truck cavalcade in Canada, it's not beyond Russia's capability to have done that, but they didn't. And there's a sense of unreality about it all. I heard on the BBC today sonorously announced that Boris Johnson was going to double the number of British troops sent to Eastern Europe. In fact, it's Estonia only. But when you drill down, you discover it's doubled from 800 soldiers to 1,500 soldiers. Now, they keep telling us, although the number often varies, that Russia has 120,000 soldiers in Ukraine, on the border, rather, with Ukraine. And so there's a bit of the sort of flea and the elephant about it all. I mean, the only people who could fight Russia is America. The Italian armed forces are not going to fight Russia. The Dutch armed forces, if they have them, are not going to fight Russia. So do American people know that if this becomes a shooting war, it's them that will be fighting Russia, nobody else?
Well, as an American, I mean, I've been living in Russia for around 4 years now, so I've been away from home for a little while. But I can tell you as an American, when things like this happened in the past, I mean, when we saw the Iraq War or the bombing of Libya with the death of Muammar Gaddafi, as an American who was in the United States, who had never traveled abroad before, I mean, the kind of stuff the media tells us and what the government is telling us, it really seems like, just all of the free world is on board for this kind of stuff. But, I really got a different perspective when I moved to Russia, because I saw how, Russians relate to this stuff. And I had closer exposure to European media, and it's not so black and white. I mean, a lot of European countries, they're not really into this idea of starting trouble with Russia, especially because Europe is seriously reliant on Russian gas to solve this energy crisis that's going on. I mean, the United States wants to ship more super expensive liquefied natural gas to Europe when there's there's Nord Stream 2, there's the Russian pipelines that are going to send natural gas to Europe at a way cheaper price. And, when you have to make a choice between those two for Europe, it's not so clear as the United States wants to make it out to be. It's not just between, freedom and authoritarianism. This is just some fake dichotomy. And I think a lot of Europeans know that, especially Germans. The German government seems to not be so fond of what the United States and the UK, like you said, seem to be doing in Ukraine. I mean, you mentioned that Boris Johnson wanted to double the amount of UK troops near Russia's border. That came not so long after Biden's plans to possibly send more US troops to near the Russian border were announced. And of course, it's also the US and the UK that are sending the most, what they call defensive and also lethal aid to Ukraine. It's most of it's coming from the United States and the UK.
Lethal aid, it's got a ring to it, that I must say. There always seems to be a pipeline in these stories. From Afghanistan to the Ukraine, Germany, Russia. How much of this is about forcing Europe to cut itself off from Russian gas and choose instead the more expensive, more environmentally unfriendly liquid gas from the United States?
I think that's been one of the core causes for years. I mean, throughout, even from before Euromaidan happened in 2014, this was a sore point between the United States and Russia. The United States wanted a hold on those energy markets. I mean, we look at the invasion of Iraq, right? Oil was involved there. We look at the bombing of Libya. It's all connected to the energy markets, and this really is no exception. The United States is basically its one selling point on its liquefied natural gas is that Europe's going to be buying from, the good guys, the guys who are not trying to hold Europe hostage, as they say in Washington. But, Russia's just saying, we've got gas. It's a lot cheaper. We can offer it to you at a reasonable price. And especially during a time when, there's an energy crisis. And I would say the reason for that energy crisis, a lot of that has to do with European countries, some of the main European countries jumping the gun on green energy policies and kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater.
Well, undoubtedly, and that's of course most acute in Germany, where nuclear energy was thrown out with the bathwater in a spasm of greenery, leaving them dependent for 50% of their energy requirements on gas. And Britain, which once led the world on nuclear energy development, is in very real danger of doing the same thing. Now, let me ask you this. You don't speak for Russia any more than I do, but as a journalist and broadcaster, let me ask you what you think. Russia, I think we both agree, Russia isn't going to invade Ukraine, but it will make what they call military technical moves elsewhere in the near abroad and in the far abroad to answer the refusal of the United States to even acknowledge properly, let alone accede to, the principal Russian security concerns, which are membership of NATO for more and more countries in its backyard and bordering it, particularly Georgia and the Ukraine. If the West will not rule out membership for these two countries, Russia is going to respond. They say on the military technical level. What do you think they mean by that?
Well, in my opinion, I mean, I've been following the story really closely. And one of the things that started to really pop into the media, specifically after the American ambassador to Moscow, John Sullivan, gave America's answer to Russia's request for security guarantees, a proposal for security guarantees, like you said, so that NATO doesn't expand into Ukraine and Georgia. Right after the United States officially basically rejected those proposals, we saw a lot of talk about how Russia is now, having talks with countries in Latin America, specifically Cuba and Venezuela, about closer military cooperation. You know, we don't exactly know what that means yet, but you know, a lot of people are calling this the new Cuban Missile Crisis. You know, and if Russia has no way to diplomatically, you know, deal with this situation, it's possible that the only way that they'll be able to defend their interests is through some sort of deterrence by evening the odds, perhaps putting their own military or weapons in countries like Cuba or Venezuela that are right on the United States doorstep. I mean, it is important to note that Russia did respond to these accusations, saying that they're not thinking of anything like that, specifically because they don't want to compromise the possibility of, they were talking about Cuba, of normalizing relations with the United States. Personally, I don't think there's going to be any normalization of relations between Cuba and the United States. I think the United States will not rest until that government is overthrown, unfortunately. But that's the Russian position. We could see a turnaround, you know, because there will be closer cooperation between Russia and these Latin American allies that Russia has.
And what about Belarusia? As the name suggests, essentially, the Belarus and Russian people are the same people. Is there any possibility, do you think, of Belarus joining the Russian Federation?
I don't really think so, just because they already actually, the relationship the Belarusian government has with the Russian one is already very open. I mean, for example, Russians can travel to Belarus without even going through a border patrol. They have a visa-free regime. They can go whenever they want. And there's a lot of things that, you know, there's a lot of things that are made very easy for Belarusians trying to go to Russia and back and forth. I don't really see why either country would want to integrate. I mean, we definitely see that after what happened with Lukashenko and the liberal protests, the potential color revolution that was attempted not so long ago, Lukashenko was obviously working closer with Vladimir Putin, and that much was seen when there was an attempted color revolution in Kazakhstan, when the CSTO went in there on a peacekeeping mission, and the government eventually got everything under control. We saw negotiations, or not negotiations, but like cooperative talk between the Belarusian government and the Russian government. I think they're going to see eye to eye, you know, throughout the whole Ukrainian conflict. Basically, Belarus does not want another NATO or even just pro-Western government on its doorstep, and Russia doesn't either. So I don't know if they're going to be integrating. I don't know if there's any economic reason for that, but they're definitely going to be working in close cooperation, even closer than before these protests started in Belarus just a couple of years ago, or last year.
On the other hand, in eastern Ukraine, Russia has said that its citizens that live there can join the Russian military if they choose and access Russian benefits, state benefits. How significant a development is that?
Well, I think it's a significant development, and I think it all started when this conflict broke out. The Lugansk People's Republic and Donetsk People's Republic declared independence from Ukraine, and you know, their electrical and water systems were connected to grids that were controlled by Kiev, and the Kiev government shut them down. So you know, these people were without electricity and clean water for a while, basically until Russian humanitarian convoys came to help them. That was the main help from Russia. And ever since then, you know, the Russian government has done more and more to help the people of this region. You know, they don't recognize these provinces as part of Russia or even as independent people's republics, but they do recognize that a lot of people living there, probably they would even consider the vast majority of people living there, are ethnically Russian. And so the Russian government in the Russian Federation feels an obligation to help them. And like you said, yeah, the more and more benefits from the Russian government are becoming available to people from those regions. It's become very, well, a lot easier for people from Lugansk and Donetsk to get Russian citizenship if they so choose. That was after Vladimir Putin signed off on that just a couple of years ago. So, and while they do have their own passport systems, they're able to travel into the Russian Federation freely, even with their own Lugansk and Donetsk passports. So, yeah, it's kind of like a similar situation as to what happened with, I would say, South Ossetia after the Georgia conflict.
Finally, I said finally, but I really mean it this time. Once Putin's finished with the Canadian trucker convoys, what next for him? He seems very relaxed, quiet even, about it all. It's Lavrov that does the heavy lifting on the international stage. I would have thought that this crisis has strengthened Putin's position in Russia and indeed internationally.
I would say so as well, because, you know, the one thing that Vladimir Putin right now can pride himself on is that Russia's a relatively stable country. I mean, you know, I've been living here for a long time. I lived in the United States for most of my life. And it's like almost immediately after I moved to Russia, I saw that, you know, there's a lot less social divisions here, and there's a lot less social instability than there is in the United States, which is supposed to be the greatest country in the world, according to what we were told as kids, you know? So, you know, watching what has been happening on the TV, what's going on in Europe and the United States, and then seeing what's going on in Russia, Russian people see the country they're living in as a stable place. And, you know, a lot of that can be attributed to Vladimir Putin's administration.
Donald, thanks for making your debut on the mother of all talk shows this evening.